very briefly, South African. I spent 11 years in the Middle East, working in the Middle East, and which I very much enjoyed. However, the it was culture shock, and doing the work that I did, working in border security, critical infrastructure protection, national defense, I was curious as to what led to the culture that I was experiencing as I traveled across the Middle East. And the only way to really understand this was to begin to study the Islamic texts. And it started to explain the behavior that we were seeing, that I was seeing, and the behavior I was seeing around the world. And when, especially in 2015, when we started to see the Islamic attacks in the West increase sharply, I took a very intense interest in what was going on from the jihadis. I started reading the texts of Al-Qaeda and other groups, and I started to read the Islamic texts and to carefully jot down, comparing what I was reading to what I was seeing happening in the West. And it was an eye-opening education.
And you are a terrorism expert, is that correct?
Um, I was studying counterterrorism, and that's actually was one of the turning points for me in that I was doing national defense, which is the protection of national borders and critical infrastructure from terrorism, from attacks, from sabotage. It was while I was doing a counterterrorism course that I learned how terrified the faculty were of talking about Islamic terrorism. We were doing a section on religious terror. We were free to talk about Christian terrorists, we were free to talk about Buddhist terrorists, and when it got to Islamic terror, the discussion stopped dead. And there were numerous people on the course that were not within the field, let's say. They were simply there, as far as I could see, to cry foul the moment the discussion headed towards Islamic ideology.
All right. So, and you were in a class, and when this subject came up, didn't they actually kick you out of the class?
Yeah, we were
Because
discussing ISIS.
you were the actual expert, and they didn't, and none of them were, and they didn't want you to talk about the facts.
Correct. At the time, ISIS was heavily featured in the news. I'd come back from Iraq. I'd actually worked in northern Iraq. I'd been close to the ISIS front lines. I was doing some work out there. What happened is that I posted some documents that were captured by troops who'd liberated certain ISIS locations, and these aligned one to one with the standard Sunni Islamic texts. And when I posted these documents, it raised a huge outcry. And let's just say things became very uncomfortable. I was banned from the forum. I was not allowed to speak, and the outcry was raised by housewives. By these were people who were doing things like, I don't know, geography and so on, who were not professional in the field. But it raised such a stink that I eventually it was uncomfortable. I couldn't stay.
All right. So, and you also lived in Dubai for 11 years, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And what did you see anything in Dubai going on, or was it peaceful there? Or
Dubai is in many ways very liberal, very modern. It is still run according to Islamic lines. The UAE is a great country. There's a lot to recommend. The leaders there are, shall we say, very forward thinking, but the same attitude is not prevalent across the rest, or most of the rest of the Middle East. Oman's a very interesting country, very peaceful. However, Islam and the Sharia still very much prevail. Sharia is the predominant law in the country. So there were certain very clear rules that you did not break. Otherwise, you would see the attitude change very quickly.
all right. So, and you have a rare level of expertise, and you're able to demystify a lot of the complexity around Islamic beliefs. Is that correct? And I want to be clear here that we're not here to bash or spin misinformation about Islam. We're here to speak specifically of the facts and the citations that you are an expert of.
Certainly, yeah. I've spent numerous years reading the Islamic texts, documenting them, creating my own database, which, as you know, I've shared with you and others. I've spent thousands and thousands of hours debating people online, and purely in an attempt to understand just what is going on. When terrorists shout Allahu Akbar and go on a killing spree, is this Islamic? Is this something that is supported by the foundational texts? So it is the political aspects of what these people are doing and how it impacts us as Westerners, as non-Muslims, that interest me.
And you have debated many hundreds of Muslims as well with this information as well, correct?
Yes, very much so.
And having studied all of this information, you were never swayed to convert to Islam either.
No,
Quite the
no.
contrary.
If you take few people, well, Islam is a very controversial subject. It is surrounded by emotion. There's not much fact to be found. It's deliberately obfuscated, in fact. But if you take a moment, and people don't really realize, the Sharia, Islamic law, can be found in a book. You can get a manual, and the most common, most popular manual is easily available for anyone. And when you read it, when you actually read what is contained in the Sharia, it is one of the most shocking things that you will ever encounter. It's insane. I was shocked by just what Sharia law encompasses.